Joe was a handsome young man who lived in EBUBE many years ago. He was a real estate agent with his own office where million naira transactions were completed every day. He lived in a lovely home with a full DSTV subscription. He could afford anything he wanted, and he had everything he wanted, save for a wife. Joe was a complete man in every sense of the word. He was tall with smooth chocolate skin and broad shoulders, and his smile could make a non-commit sin. However, his love life was as empty as an unfinished beauty, which made him feel like a failure. Joe had always wished to get married and settle down early. He loved love. He thought that at 30 he would be happily married with his last child in primary 5, but now at 35 he was still single and without any children or prospects. Things hadn't gone well according to his plan thus far, because of one thing he couldn't control, his genotype. Joe felt it was a curse in his life, because it had caused him so many heartbreaks over the years. He had met a stunning woman named Angela during his National Youth Service call in Kano. Joe had approached Angela and struck up a friendship with her before starting to take her out for lunch. Then they began chatting on WhatsApp and making voice calls, and before he knew it, they had fallen in love. Angela was the ideal woman Joe had ever wanted. After their service, she became a successful financial analyst at a big firm. She could cook more than the basics and scrub jeans better than any washing machine on earth, and she also had a perfect figure-8 body that Joe liked and was a God-fearing bad. Their relationship was so wonderful for the 5 years they dated, and then one night Joe proposed to Angela at a fancy restaurant with flowers and glitters. The couple were ecstatic to be finally getting married, but just as they began making plans for their wedding, they got the shock of their lives. They both had his genotype, which made them incompatible. The wedding was called off, and their future plans were abruptly ended. That was how their 5-year relationship came to an end. After that experience, Joe was devastated. He cried bitterly for weeks and was even admitted to the hospital because of heartbreak. But life had to go on, so he began the ultimate search for another girl who was as classy and sweet as Angela's ex and also not as genotype like him. Every weekend, Joe went from one wedding party to another, looking for his missing Reby. He even signed up on several dating websites, but it was as if his village people had vowed that he would die single. None of the girls he met were good enough for him. They were either too flat like blank or too fat with Christian mother arms, or they were not successful enough for him. And the ones that were his spec all had as genotype. Joe was frustrated. It is like God is using me to test something, he told himself one night, as he stared at himself in the mirror wondering why his case was different from his other friends. One weekend, Joe and 2 of his pals, Sam and Leo, were invited to a wedding by one of their university classmates. When they arrived at the party, Joe sat at the wedding reception as if he had just lost his wallet. His plate of jollof rice was still full and untouched, his drake had gone down, and his face was long like Todd Milan Bridge. The MC was making jokes into the microphone, people were dancing shaku shao on the dance floor, and the bride and groom were giggling and smiling as if they held the key to solving world hunger. Would you not smile and giggle if it were your own wedding? However, Joe simply sat there, as if he owed his landlord 2 years' worth of rent. He let out a big sigh for the 3rd time in 60 seconds and hissed in frustration. Leo, one of his friends, leaned over and whispered, "I be stop frowning your face, not be funeral we day na wedding." Joe gave Fee a bombastic side eye and east. "I don't blame you now, say you don't marry born to children, how will you not talk to me anyhow?" He backed and Leo on serious burst into laughter and said, "Guy let me say make you be as see fresh AA boys like me, we know the stress now babes." Joe just stared at them, unable to say anything to the unserious man, who had no filter, and didn't know when to keep quiet. He was weary of his situation, weary of seeing small boys with fresh beards marrying fine girls while he, with full beards and full resources, was still single. "I am tired, Leo," he said softly. "Another wedding, another reminder that I'm still single." Sam, one of his other friends with a sharp tongue and no filter, joined in the conversation and said, "Bro, no vest, but if wedding was a sport you could don't win trophy. Oh, you attend wedding like say them they share land for married people. And you people think it's funny, or is it because you were fortunate enough to marry the first girl who winked at you? I've been on more dates than an Uber driver, and have nothing to show for it. Joe's buddy burst out laughing as Joe rolled his eyes. Joe leaned back and gazed at the sky. Is it asking too much for me to simply want to love and be loved? What else do I need when I have a home, a job, and even a complete DSTV subscription? The next time you meet any girl, Leo advised harshly, get right to the issue and ask her about her genotype to avoid breakfast and needless wile. As soon as you say hello, Sam interjected with as or AA, that one, and not that they waste time at all. Joe shook his head, indicating that I should now be moving about. I've been asking genotype, as if I want to open a blood bank, eh? Now, just before Uncle Leo and Sam simultaneously cawed and burst out laughing while the men were still speaking, the bride's train began to enter the hall. One bridesmaid in particular entered from the back, wearing a soft gold lace dress, her skin glowing, her waist snatched, and walking with quiet confidence. She didn't smile much, nor did she try hard, rather, she simply exuded sense and class. Joe immediately sighted her, stood up, and adjusted his dress. His friend noticed him staring and almost drooling all over the girl and asked, "Huh, guy, where you they go?" Hold on, hold on, hold on. You see that babe? Before they snatch her, let me quickly go and say hi to her. Ask her for a genotype first, don't go and fall in love at chop breakfast and start doing heartbreak music on WhatsApp status again, Joe retorted, ignoring the shouts. He began to navigate the reception hall toward the fine babe he had just seen, offering 2 prayers in his heart along the way, Lord, let her be single and let her genotype not be ass. Joe approached her, stood in front of her, and said, "Hi, my name is Joe. I couldn't help but notice you from over there, you just dropped something." "What did I drop?" the girl said, turning quickly to see what she had dropped. "Your beauty just blew me away, you look amazing," she replied. They exchanged pleasantries, and she told Joe her name was Princess. Joe complimented her, and she smiled. She was a human resource manager in a major company, looked affluent, and had traveled extensively for vacation, making this one a complete option, he thought to himself. She was gorgeous, elegant, sensible, and successful. Joe immediately sent her a message saying, "Hope you got home safely, my bride." "LOL, bright care, thank you," she responded. When Joe returned home, he gave her a smile in response and kissed his phone like a kid who had just received a box of chocolate. Joe felt happy and unlike he had when he left for the wedding that morning, and their relationship began that way. They spoke every day, exchanged morning greetings, shared bedtime prayers, work gist, and childhood memories. In order to impress her, Joe even lied about knowing how to make bagger soup. She told him about her job as a human resource manager, while he told her about his real estate business. They connected like Bluetooth. One day, Joe brought her to a posh restaurant for their typical weekend excursion, and as they were sitting there chatting and holding hands, I abruptly said, "Babe, there's something I've been meaning to ask you. It's been bothering me, and I think we should have it figured out by now." "What's up, baby girl, what's bothering you?" Joe asked with worry on his face. "Talk to me, please. Oh, what is your genotype?" "Because me, I'm so I don't want to waste time on something that won't work. I have made such mistakes in the past," Princess said with seriousness. Joe froze, he almost choked on the cocktail he was sipping. "A genotype, okay," he meant to say, as Buttergo did mistake, and he ended up saying I'm AA. Now he lied about his genotype. I heaved a deep sigh of relief and said, "Thank God you are AA," and Joe just stared at her and shook his head like a gamma lizard. He couldn't bring himself to tell her his genotype. He ignored all his friends' warning and simply just smiled at her as they carried on with the rest of their date. That night Joe couldn't sleep, he kept thinking about the big lie he told earlier. On that day, one princess advised him to call Mota, confess everything, and be free, while the other advised him to simply remain silent and appreciate the moment because he and his future bride both have as genotypes, which does not guarantee that all of their children will have sickle cell. Joe kept telling himself that, but for the next few days, he was not at peace. He began to become less outgoing, and when the girl inquired about his odd behavior, he attributed it to work-related concerns. Joe got up one morning after days of endless worries and went straight to a nearby hospital to speak with a doctor. When he arrived at the doctor's office, he informed him that he and the girl he plans to marry were both as